Welcome to Gracefully Graying. I am your host, Attorney Henry Gornbein. Today on Gracefully Graying, I am very pleased to welcome back as our guest Dr. Peter Lichtenberg, who is the Wayne State University Distinguished Service Professor of Psychology and Gerontology, as he leads us in a discussion of understanding vulnerability to financial exploitation. Dr. Lichtenberg, I think the last time you were here, you were the director of the Wayne State University Department of Merrill Palmer Institute of Gerontology, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, for 26 years, I led the Institute of Gerontology at Wayne State University, and for 14 of those, led also the Merrill Palmer Skillman Institute. Now I'm a recovering administrator and a research faculty member.
Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background, and then we'll get to the
Sure.
topic at hand.
You know, Henry, I'm a clinical geropsychologist. That is a clinical psychologist, PhD, who specialized in working with older adults throughout my 38-year career. And the first half of my career, third of my career as a clinician researcher, really most of my time was spent in clinical care. And then I became a research administrator and researcher. I continued to have a clinical practice. And over the last 20 years, Henry, I've focused more and more on issues related to financial capacity, financial decision-making, financial management, and what we're talking about today, financial exploitation of older adults.
You know, every day on the news, we see another scam being perpetrated, and it's terrifying. I've been the victim or attempted victim of scams, and now I don't even answer the phone anymore because there's so many scam calls coming through. And it's a matter, I feel if it's important, people can leave a message and I'll get back to them. So why don't you tell us about your Prevention of Financial Exploitation project?
We're really excited about this project, Henry, and I'm thrilled to talk about it. Our Prevention of Financial Exploitation project is really one of the first that's ever been done besides just general education to try to help prevent exploitation. We have 5 factors that we focus on. It's a 3-session, one-on-one intervention that we've tested and are continuing to test. And the first factor that we focus on is financial vulnerability. And I know we'll be talking about our financial vulnerability survey and what it can tell us about risk for exploitation. The second thing we focus on is financial literacy. Things like, do people understand inflation? Do they understand interest? Do they understand basic investment? We also talk about budgeting and crediting if people want to. The third thing we focus on is really financial exploitation. What are scammers trying to do? And we've created a mnemonic called the pressure, and we go through our pressure mnemonic and tell people to keep it by the phone to remind them. The fourth thing is, do they have a trusted advocate? This is where you as an attorney come in, Henry. We want people to not choose who they're the most friendly with, but who they can trust. And it turns out it's really important to have a trusted financial advocate to help protect yourself from exploitation. And the fifth thing is, can they create a financial inventory in case that advocate need to step in? Where would they find the individual's financial records? And so we do that over 3 sessions. We've tested it on the first 50 individuals to go through our program, and we've had some astounding results, Henry. This is a risk reduction program. We've reduced financial vulnerability. We've increased financial literacy. And interestingly, we've reduced loneliness through this intervention, which is, kind of makes you think a little bit.
Tell us about some of the questions that are asked. I mean, this is intriguing. It's like, we're dealing with even the question I have is whether our leadership understands finances, but that's another topic.
Well, this is personal finance. I know I don't understand the bigger finances myself, but this is kind of managing your checkbook. Our wallet study actually got 150 individuals to share with us 12 months of their checking account statements. And we've been learning a lot about how they manage money and how that's related to things like decision making and exploitation and early memory loss. And this is probably one of the biggest vulnerabilities that people have to financial exploitation or vulnerability to exploitation is their own sense that they're declining cognitively, that their memory or problem solving abilities are worse than a year ago.
Well, what's interesting, Peter, is the fact that more and more people, as we're living, are going through cognitive impairment. And I'm watching a lot of the statistics, and there's been a tremendous rise in dementia and Alzheimer's. So, I mean, these clearly are significant issues more and more for all of us who are aging.
They are. And Henry, it's not that the prevalence is increasing, it's just that the numbers are skyrocketing. So the number of people now over 85 is just dramatically greater than it was, and number of people over 70. So it just keeps increasing. And so we see increasing numbers of people with dementia. But I'm even talking, Henry, before there's any kind of dementia diagnosis, just when people, what we call subjective cognitive decline. I just think that my memory is not as good as it used to be.
Well, my wife tells me every day that mine is not as good as it used to be. So there's no question about that. So, so tell us more about some of the issues that we should be watching, and from your pilot program.
Yeah. So our pressure mnemonic, I'd love to share that with you, Henry. This is things that we need to learn some of the specific, but also some of the general techniques of scammers, and that's critical. So, one thing is that the P stands for phone or other unsolicited contact by email, mail, text, and we do encourage people to do what you do, Henry. Don't answer the phone for numbers you don't recognize. Get caller ID. They'll leave a message, and you can decide if you need to call them back. But it's that unsolicited contact, and it's aimed to try to get a reaction. The R is for somebody's requesting money by gift card, by transfer, by Bitcoin. Unusual way of getting money. I mean, how many times have you wired money to somebody? How many times have you gone and bought gift cards and sent in mass to people, or cryptocurrency? So that request for money, the R. The E is extracting personal information. So some scams aren't going to ask you for a lot of money out front. What they want to do is get control of your computer if you have personal files there. They want your social security number. They want your bank account number. They may even ask for those directly, and that's that extracting personal information. The S is for secrecy, and scammers know one truth that we found over and over in our research, and this is kind of astounding, Henry. 50% of people, no matter how we ask them, when we ask them, what the sample consists of, say they wish they had someone to talk to about their finances at least sometimes. And scammers know this, and scammers really kind of try to reduce the emotional angst about finances while they try to get your money. But to do that, they have to keep their relationship with you a secret, and so you'll see that they'll tell you that nobody else understands, what you guys are talking about. They're the only ones you can trust. The second S is for spamming. Once you fall victim, boy, they're just going to hound you to get more and more money from you, or just to try to break you. Get you at different times of day or night. The U is for urgency. So they want to insist that you act quickly before you have time to think. It's that Daniel Kahneman's fast thinking without being able to analyze things. They want you to feel like you have to act now. And that's where some of these scary scams come in. We're going to come arrest you if you don't pay off your debt now, so forth and so on. The next R is for repetitive requests. So over and over again, and especially too in confidence scams, when the relationship scams. How many times have you gotten into a close, intimate relationship where somebody is asking for money over and over again, and you think about your own history with that, it's not usually the case. And the final E is it's emotional. They want to make you panic or get excited, like when you win the grand prize, or panic, your grandson's in jail down in Argentina. You got to send money to let him get an attorney so that you act without thinking. So that's our pressure mnemonic. Henry, what do you think of that?
I can personally relate to it. A number of years ago, I had a call from one of my uncles in the 90s who called another uncle of mine because he had been called by a spammer to say that they had to bail me out of jail, which was totally not true. And I explained that. So this is an example of a scam. Another example of a scam is the fact that, uh, well, someone was using one of my credit cards a couple of months ago, and we had to cut it down because there was some suspicious activity. So I literally had to cancel the credit card and get another one. And years ago, I had my identity stolen where someone was filing a false tax return. And for years, whenever I file a tax return, it has to be done through multiple steps. So I can personally relate to all of this. And, you
Yeah.
know, it's getting worse and worse. And that's what's scary.
And there's three kinds of exploitation that you're talking about there, Henry. One is the scams, where somebody's actually relating to you, whether it's through a text or email. Um, the second is identity theft, where somebody just gets a hold of your identity and then starts to use it. And the third, of course, is exploitation by a trusted other, and that's abuse of trust, financial entitlement that families sometimes have. And so there are three different forms of exploitation. We call them all exploitation, but they take on different forms. And one of the things about identity theft is that people have to really keep watch over their accounts. And we do recommend to people, if they're able, to get online account access, because it helps them to monitor what's going on. If you're only looking at a statement, you don't know what's going on between 30 days ago when you got your statement and 30 days when you get the next one.
To me, modern technology has made everything worse. It's like, I'm hounded with spam emails every day. You've got phone calls, you've got emails, you've got texts. It's like people are more and more sophisticated. People are, because of the internet, you can be accessed from anywhere in the world. So what you're doing is really wonderful, but it's like it's like you're putting a finger in a dike, so to speak.
We are, and we hope that that finger will make a difference for a number of people. Henry, you're absolutely right, though, as far as the magnitude of the problem. Some of the international countries that had almost no scam activity once they got social um, media. They have started to have a lot more scam activity. Scammers are very sophisticated, and there's no doubt about that. What we really want is, to prevent people from getting so isolated about their money that they end up giving all of it away. You get scammed out of $25, $100. You have to get rid of a credit card. You can do that, but we're really worried too about people who are extremely vulnerable and can lose all of their money that they need for retirement and for taking care of themselves. And so, we're not going to stop. Our next step is to develop this into a group based format, our prevention program.
Well, first of all, tell us more about the results of your pilot study.
Yeah. So our pilot study had 50 individuals. First thing we asked them was, how did they like the sessions? We asked them each session, was it useful information? Did it cover things that they thought were important? And did they trust the information? And we got very high ratings on that. So we know that this is an acceptable intervention. And then we did pre-post testing on our financial vulnerability survey, and as well as some other measures. The financial vulnerability survey, Henry, we discovered about 6 years ago. We asked the question, how much does context matter in financial decision making when it comes to exploitation? And we discovered that it matters a lot, and that we already had the items for a new scale, a financial exploitation vulnerability scale, that we put on our website. Olderadultnestegg.com is our website. That's olderadultnestegg.com. And if you go to the landing page for older adults, you could take the survey anonymously, and you can find out what your risks are for financial exploitation. There's really three general areas of vulnerability that we probe. One is kind of financial strain, financial self efficacy, and satisfaction with the way finances are managed. The second is really psychological aspects around money, anxiety, feelings of depression, uh, wishing you had someone to talk to about finances, and whether your memory loss decline has interfered with your ability to manage financial decisions or financial transactions. And the final one is relationship issues around money, and whether there's a new strain in a relationship because of finances. We see not an insignificant amount of this, maybe 1 in 5, people telling us that, yeah, my relationship with one of my children, adult children, or friend or nephew is now strained due to finances as I've gotten older. And we ask about conflict and whether people feel like somebody is trying to take their money. So that really gives you some insight into uh, what your own risk level is. And also, we have a ton of resources that we offer, other websites and other resources that get linked there.
Peter, how can people volunteer to participate in the project?
So, in our study for the prevention project, they can call our project director, Latoya Hall, at 313 664 2608. 313 664 2608. And that's Latoya Hall.
I think I've interviewed her a couple of times on Gracefully Graying, and she has some wonderful ideas. So she's well worth contacting.
She is. We're joined at the hip in this work, and we've been doing this work together for a decade.
Peter, why don't you tell us about the paper that you authored from the Wallet, WALLET study?
Yeah, the Wallet study, wealth accumulations and losses, and later early cognitive transitions. Our Wallet study. Henry, this is a unique data set. 150 people gave us access to their checking account statements. So we saw all the things that they did with their checking accounts, and we interviewed them as well. And part of our interview was some financial decision making, financial vulnerability, but also whether they'd been exploited. And this latest paper really looks at whether what predicted who had been exploited. And there really were two factors. The first was early memory loss, subjective cognitive decline. Early memory loss made people about 3 times more vulnerable to exploitation. That's a big number. I mean, we're all vulnerable, as you're kind of pointing out, Henry. It's a huge problem. We're all vulnerable, but some people are more vulnerable, and 3 times more vulnerable is a big number. But decision making, and especially, again, that financial vulnerability, was also a big predictor of who was exploited. And finally, people who were spending excessively, people who were spending beyond what they had budgeted for the year, all sources of income, not just their Social Security, but any kind of required minimum distributions or investment distributions they were taking, or pensions. And those who were spending beyond that had a higher risk of being exploited. So it all kind of goes together, these intersecting aspects of financial capacity, if you will. Can you manage your money? Can you make informed decisions? Can you avoid financial exploitation? it all gets harder when you have early memory loss.
Well, I remember from a prior discussion we had that you had done a survey where you saw, and I could be wrong, but it was like a 10% uh, cognitive impairment resulted in 20% loss of net worth, something to that effect.
So I was quoting a study, yeah, Angrasani and Lee did, where what they noticed, the 10% memory loss was related to almost a 20% wealth loss, not just income loss, but wealth loss over a 2-year period. Kind of dramatic. Yeah, I'm glad you remember that because I do too. It's just very striking. I
I
think
mean,
I think one of the things about memory loss, Henry, is like, well, what is it? It's early memory loss. So what's the big deal? Is that people stop being able to track what they're doing, and that's a big problem with money. When you don't know what you're doing, you tend to do things that you shouldn't, like spend too much, give it to people who are exploiting you, and feel very vulnerable.
so it seems like it's important to have people for protection as you're aging, and I guess a lot of people don't have that. I mean, I'm thinking about the fact that having a good financial planner uh, can be very, very important. Having stops in place so that, if you want to transfer some of your funds, it takes more than one step. I mean, what are some of the things that we can do to become more vigilant as we're aging?
Um, Learn to talk about money. This is a huge issue. Money is quite a taboo topic, and scammers know this. And so they're very comfortable helping you talk about money and reducing your loneliness, and they know how to, connect with you quite quickly. What we all need to do is learn how to talk about money with people we trust, because uh, before we jump into a decision, we need to talk it over.
Sure.
And that's really what scammers count on, is that money's taboo. People don't want to talk about it. Even people who have great relationships with their adult children, even people have great relationships with their spouse. Money is taboo, and they don't talk about it a lot. But that underlying anxiety about money is there in so many people. Scammers pick up on it. They provide that reassurance, and then they steal your money.
So I guess the key is, who can you trust?
Yeah, that is the key. You really have to think about who you can trust. And you talk about financial advisor, that's great. But have you ever called your financial advisor and said, "Hey, before I make this contribution to these people who seem to have all of a sudden, developed some life-threatening illness, and I don't really know them, but I like their story." Have that conversation. And what does your financial advisor say to you? And financial advisors are worried too about memory loss in their clients, and yet they're not that skilled in identifying it. One of the things that we do, we partner with Janice Henderson Investors, and we co-created trainings that they're giving all across the country, and we've had hundreds now of financial advisors create accounts on our website, olderadultnestegg.com. They can use all our tools.
See, that sounds very, very helpful because, if you're getting bad information, you're at more risk. And the other thing, I know family members can take advantage of you. And often it's a situation, I mean, I've dealt with this as attorney where there have been siblings where one may be closer to an aging parent and may be taking a lot of money or using money. So, I mean, that's an issue too. So, what about family members,
Oh
Peter?
yeah, trusted others. That's that third one, and it's devastating. Honestly, in our research, when trusted others take money, they take more of it than scammers, and the mental health issues related to that, stress, anxiety, depression, much higher in people who've been exploited by a trusted other. And you know, families kind of have a couple ways. What happens is, as somebody gets older and perhaps stops driving, becomes a little bit more dependent on their adult children, Sometimes there's a sense of financial entitlement that the adult child feels like this is my inheritance. I'm just using it early, when in fact they're stealing their parents' money. And sometimes we have the prodigal son or daughter effect, somebody that's been estranged from this parent comes back into their life as if they're their best friend and isolates them from the other siblings and gets them to sign a new will or trust over giving more to the prodigal son or daughter. So we see all these kinds of manipulations, a sense of entitlement, coercion, undue influence, and you know, trusted others when they exploit you may also uh, engage in other forms of elder abuse, not only emotional but maybe physical, and that's where it gets very dangerous.
This has been very enlightening. It's like we've barely scratched the surface, and there are so many things. So, I mean, you've already mentioned how people can get involved in some of the programs, but what are some of the other things that you're working on? And, we have maybe a minute or so left of our show. So, what are some final thoughts that you would like to share with us before we sign off, Peter?
Yeah, I really want to highlight this idea of financial vulnerability to exploitation. Henry, we just did some analyses on people who've come onto our website, 1,500. And we have a scale that we've just created called Subjective Cognitive Decline Financial. And it has 3 scores: no subjective cognitive decline, subjective cognitive decline in general, and the third, the most serious, subjective cognitive decline, and it interferes with financial decision making and financial transactions. We are finding that that scale is highly related to people's sense of financial vulnerability and their scores on our financial vulnerability survey. So we're going to be writing that up. I mean, that's a big sample, and it's the results are quite powerful. I think this idea of financial vulnerability is a good one for people to take to heart and get an honest assessment of themselves. Again, you can go on our website at no charge, of course. Just go on olderadultnestegg.com, go on the landing page for older adults, take the financial vulnerability survey, and it'll give you some good tips. And we've talked about a couple. Get that trusted advocate. Understand how scammers work. This pressure mnemonic. Think about that, and create that financial inventory and learn to talk about finances and how you're protecting your finances from scammers, because that's the name of the game now. And you've said it, Henry, they're getting more and more sophisticated.
Oh, it's terrifying. And I guess finally, don't make quick financial decisions. Don't act impulsively. And we're out of time. Dr. Peter Lichtenberg, again, you're a wonderful guest, and I want to thank you so much for being on our show today. And I want to thank our viewers for watching, and our sponsors, of course, for making Gracefully Graying possible. So thank you again.